Hello, I am Mamadou Mbouch and welcome to the Viewpoint. Today we're going to talk about geopolitics, or perhaps more specifically, we want to deal with or explore at least this question. What world do we live in? Arguably, between 1961 and 1990, when the Berlin Wall was erected and when it came down, there was only one dynamic, the Cold War between the Soviet Union and USA. And most of the other countries around the world were other satellites of one camp or another. Then, after that, the end of history theories began to fill our bookshops. But of course, according to some commentators, that went up in smoke in September 9th, 2001. Now there's talk of the rise of China, which has obviously changed the whole political landscape in the world. But how? Russia, Ukraine, what effect would it have in the end? And there's Taiwan to come. In the meantime, Africa, we've gone from the OAU to the AU. What has changed? What direction are we going? What does non-alignment mean anymore? Should we be non-aligned? These are some of the questions I want to explore today. And my guest here is eminently qualified to give us insights into some of these. He's a naturalized Swedish citizen who holds a bachelor's degree in international relations and two masters, double master's degrees in political science at Uppsala and international humanitarian studies. He was also, in 2017, Erasmus Fellow in Oxford, where he took critical theory and comparative politics in Brookes. And a 2020 Erasmus Scholar at Sciences Po in France. He's currently pursuing a research degree at Uppsala. He's got wide-ranging interests in foreign policy, diaspora studies, state building, democratization process, China-Africa relations, you name it, and also a contributor to Al Jazeera. Wow, where can I end? Mr. Ahmad Jeng, a man of many parts, evidently.
Thank you.
Of course, with us, this wasn't the first interview we've had. The last one we had was specifically on the diaspora.
Diaspora, exactly.
Yes, but today we'll working on a wider canvas here. We want to get a feel to explore international relations today,
Exactly.
and how do we situate ourselves in it? Not just Africa, but even more specifically Gambia, in relation to even ECOWAS, in relation to the AU, in relation to all of these bodies that we are part of.
Okay.
But perhaps first, as a way of framing the discussion, the question I began with, what world do we live in?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I think it's an interesting question, actually. To answer the question also depends largely on what school of thought you're coming from, but also what sort of scholarship you have in terms of academia, I think. Peace scholars would say, you know, the world has become more peaceful today than it was quite a long time ago. Less wars, less interstate wars today, of course, compared to many, many years ago. But of course, you have war within the states, state and non-state actors and all of that. But I think I would say that we live in a world of organized chaos. Yes, that's how I will respond to this question. It's a chaos we have, but of course it's an organized one. You have the state.
You have to elaborate on that.
You have the state, and then you have what we call non-state actors, and that's like terrorist organizations. And then, of course, like I said, you have the state, which is more of an institutionalized framework. But then what you have is, for a lot of people, they say the influence of the state is dissipating. It's actually gradually declining. International organizations like the United Nations, WHO are becoming fundamentally strong institutions that are actually playing to a varying degree the role of the states in many ways when it comes to poverty reduction or eradication, if you want.
But does this happen across the board, or it depends? Perhaps with low income countries, they have more influence perhaps there than, do you see it that way, than for instance in the US or Britain? What do you think? This influence, this rising influence of these international bodies?
Yeah, I think, usually I say where your money goes is where your mouth goes. The international bodies that we talk about, NGOs and international organizations, they pump a lot of money into developing countries. And of course,
but they also get the money from the developed world.
Yes,
they get the money from somewhere.
I think it's a kind of a symbiotic relationship in many ways. The money comes from different sources. Even all these African countries are also members of these international organizations, and they also pay annual fees, or they call it, for being members of these organizations.
Doesn't that make them sort of agents of the status quo?
I mean, I think where you are driving this is the idea of aid.
No, not just international, just these international agencies, these Bretton Woods institutions. We all know with some of them, they are provenance.
Yeah, I know.
So sometimes one gets the sense that these are really here to preach, as it were.
But we're just driving back to what I mentioned about organized chaos is that the ruler has always, to a varying degree, had conflicts, and I think conflict is part of nature, is part of man as well. So I think when you look at it today, there are a lot of scholars, political realist scholars, who argue for a realist perspective. A lot of people argue that, look, the world is anarchy. The fact that it's anarchy, it means the survival of the state, the survival of the leadership, and the idea of self-help, where countries have to help themselves. In the absence of
survival of the fittest.
Yeah, in the absence of more of a Darwinist approach. In the absence of a police, there is no world police, which of course the United States, to a varying degree, acts upon, right? In the absence of that, what you have, it's a kind of an organized chaos where you have big states, powerful states, bullying small states in an organized way and in a justified way. And that goes back to the United States invasion of Iraq, to the recent invasion of not invasion, but the war in Ukraine that Russia started. But all of them justify this as means of protecting themselves. It is called defensive realism.
But in the end, politics is about power. What do you say?
Exactly. So I think with all of this, with this equation, you can see why a lot of states actually want to arm themselves with nuclear weapons, because you have this thesis which is so mad, mutually assured destruction, which basically means that if I have nuclear warhead and you have nuclear warhead, we would not fight. So this is why they say nuclear powers don't fight each other. But the problem with this is that they probably will not fight each other directly, but they fight other small countries.
This proxy wars.
Yeah, exactly. And we have almost about 7 nuclear powers states in the world, right? And you have like 100 something, almost 200 states in the United Nations. So if only 7 have nuclear weapons and a lot of them go around bullying small states, the ones that are emerging states, like let's say Brazil, Iran and a few other countries, North Korea and a few other countries, would also want to get something that guaranteed their security.
Yes, and you realize that now they had the nuclear non-proliferation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now that's gone out of the window, surely. Nobody would.
Yeah, but
really.
the problem with it also, a lot of people argue, look, we talk about the non-proliferation and all of that, but of course it is under the somehow, maybe not directly, but indirect help and blessing, of course, of Britain and other places, that India and Pakistan got nuclear warheads, and even though they were not supposed to in the first place. So you can see it's a kind of an organized chaos that we live in today.
China, how does China come in? Because for a long time it was either the Soviet Union, now Russia, USA, then recently, but more of an economic power, isn't it? Perhaps far more, that is what is emphasized, much more than the militaristic elements. It seems that is China's way, isn't it?
But you cannot embrace a militaristic element when you don't have economic power. When Mao Zedong died in the 70s and then Deng Xiaoping came to power in 79, China started, of course, its process of industrialization and of course development. Then you can see China has a different political ideology, of course, compared to other countries. And this political ideology actually is what helps it today to be a contending power, a state that is highly respected in many dimensions, if you want, but also which is criticized for its lack of human rights, But then it has a system of what usually a lot of people call state capitalism, which is not, a lot of people will say, oh, China is communism and is all of that.
Socialism.
Exactly, but it's more like a state, sort of a state capitalism, whereas the state actually paves the way for a lot of other things within it. The problem with a lot of our countries in the global south, and India is an example today, is that it embraces capitalism too quickly. And that actually today, India, a couple of years ago, India houses more poor people than the whole of Africa combined.
That's it, but even here you would realize that after independence, there were lots of state-owned enterprises, sort of similar thing, isn't it? I mean, for instance, by the time Nkrumah, by the time he was toppled, there were 73, 75 state-owned enterprises, but the problem is they were all inefficient. Now, this is a crucial element in the performance of our state-owned enterprises.
But I think
they appear not to be performing.
No, but I think the biggest critical juncture that we had in Africa, of course, is in the 80s when the structural adjustment came around. When states like the Gambia and many other countries, of course, were forced to privatize. And to, of course, dispose of a lot of enterprises, to defund schools as well, public schools, and to privatize a lot of things. And this privatization, maybe Gambia was not really affected, but a lot of countries like Senegal face a lot of challenges. You remember during those days, of course, Ousmane Sembène was one of those great writers who was writing a lot of things about the Senegalese political and economic structure. And Senegal had a lot of protests during those days. The syndicalists in Dakar, they had a lot of connection with the syndicalists in Mali. Mali was part of the Senegalese Federation. And that was all of these.
Unionism.
Yeah, exactly. So all of these actually in the 80s with the economic crisis, you had a kind of the states rolling back, and a lot of private institutions coming in.
This is the key. This is the thing we were talking about earlier with these international agencies. I mean, the orthodoxy then, it was afterwards they realized that perhaps that was the wrong model. I think apparently with the influence of Amartya Sen, the Nobel Prize winner. So this is it. They come with formulas. This is the key. Then you never really know how
Exactly.
well
Exactly.
they will work till
Exactly.
years later.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
what happened with us
Yeah.
in the 80s.
Exactly.
What are they doing now
Exactly.
that we will pay the price for
Exactly.
in years to
Exactly.
come? That is the fear.
Actually, when you can draw comparison also, maybe parallel to what happens also in 2008 in Europe. You know, the Europe bond crisis. So you know, these international institutions recommended, of course, the European Union, some European countries, to cut public funding. That was what they did in the 80s in Africa. But these people refuse. These states, they're like, no, we cannot do that. If we do that, our people will starve. Our institutions will not function, and this is not how our system is built. So I know a lot of critics of the World Bank and IMF also mentioned this, that you know, these policies that came around during those days were actually designed by people sitting in, let's say, you know, in an AC house, a room, apartment, or whatever you want,
Yeah,
an
ivory
office.
tower.
Exactly, in office. They've never been to Africa, or maybe they've been to Africa from the airport. They use their air-conditioned cars and to the hotel, a 5-star hotel, where they sit and then maybe visit 1 or 2 seats around. And then these are the people actually designing policies about poverty reduction. You know, you can see some sort of like disingenuity in many of the ways that development was conducted.
Absolutely. So your organized chaos here is quite interesting. So on the one hand, we've got the rise of terrorism. I mean, from 9/11, the whole world just changed. You've got that, the non-state actors, as it were. And with us here, there's no international police, but it appears that in Africa, the way they police us is with aid, money. That is how they police us.
Yeah.
You've got that angle. And Soviet Union there, China.
Yeah.
In such a world, yes, there's non-alignment. That was our strategy, was it, during the Cold War and all of it.
Exactly.
Is it still applicable? Should we still be non-aligned? And what do we mean by that today?
Yeah. I mean,
and even then, was it really non-aligned?
Yeah.
Because all of them, they were receiving support from one or the other.
Exactly. So the idea of non-aligned movement, actually, I think, I'm not sure, maybe a lot of viewers might correct me here, I think was started, of course, by the Indian Prime Minister, Nehru, I think, you know, but exactly. But even with the non-aligned movement, of course, the non-aligned movement came about because there was this dyadic approach to international politics. You're either with the Soviet Union or with the West. So the non-aligned movement were there to say we are not with anyone, we are within ourselves. You know, anyone who wants to join us, you can join us and work with us. We're ready to work with all parties,
it was
right?
a kind of thought force.
Exactly. But even with these, smart leaders were able to actually maneuver the system. Some days talk to the Soviet Union, other days talk to the United States and get funding and then move on. But today it's difficult to reactivate the non-aligned movement. Why? Because the world has become such an organized chaos, and then of course we live in a multipolar world today. It's not bipolar or unipolar where you have one state. It's more like a multipolar, and a lot of people say it's even multiplex. By that they mean it's multiple states that actually are out there, but also all of these states, they have influences in one way or the other. If you look at Brazil, which has a population of, it's one of the biggest countries in the world, right? It has a lot of influences in Latin America, right? You look at South Africa, which is also a powerhouse in Africa. So you can see all of these countries have some certain influence in their region. So what you have is a complex situation, of course, with the rise of China as well. So you can see a kind of a decline of what we call, or in fact, maybe not decline, actually, maybe the end of empire, if you know what I mean.
Yes,
So
even though Russia was holding on very tightly to the old idea still.
yes, yes, yes.
And China might flex its muscles again with Taiwan.
Exactly. I think Russia is an interesting case also to look at in many ways. You know, it's always good to go back to history. I'm not a historian, a political scientist, but you can see that history informs you or us as a people about the current situation we are in. In the 60s, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, which actually almost led to the Third World War, just because the Soviet Union, Russia, if you want, took some nuclear warheads in Cuba, and they were pointing almost towards Miami, which is the United States, right?
25 minutes.
Exactly. And the U.S. felt like this is like, you know, threatening the security of the United States. And it was very intense movement, I will say, period. And of course, Russia pulled out. So fast forward in 2022, Ukraine wants to join NATO, which would basically probably mean that NATO would have its military bases in Ukraine, which is bordering Russia also.
But Ukraine is a sovereign state. It
Yes.
can do whatever it wants to do.
Cuba was also a sovereign state during those days.
Absolutely.
But
we understand the politics that made that difficult.
Yeah.
And actually they chose, they wanted to be with the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
It was a decision.
Exactly.
But right here, Ukraine hasn't chosen that. It is
Yeah.
Soviet Union, it is Russia that's forcing it.
Yeah.
There are slightly different
Yeah.
contextual...
You mean Russia forcing Ukraine into... No.
To join them. Why have they attacked them?
Yeah, you know, I don't think
As
I don't think it is before the war. I don't think it was the calculation of Russia for Ukraine to join them. I think the biggest calculation actually has always been we don't want to have NATO around our borders.
But this is very interesting.
Yeah.
Because somebody said, was it Jim Baker, those who were at the negotiations, what Gorbachev said afterwards, there was a lot of back and forth. Oh, I didn't say it, oh, you said it. You know, even Condoleezza Rice. So those who were there said that they were actually astounded, staggered that the Soviet group, they really didn't mind. After all, they accepted the unification of Germany.
Yes,
See?
they did.
So it was a slippery slope. It was just a slippery slope to what was to follow.
Exactly.
But they were also part of it.
Yes.
But this is the key. Do we think that are we in a new Cold War? Some people say that. I've heard one analyst say that what Korea was, you know, in 1994 to the Cold War I, well, maybe Ukraine would be. And the Cuban Missile Crisis would be Taiwan.
No,
What do you think?
for me, actually, I think the Cold War never ended.
All right.
Yeah, I feel like the Cold War was probably just hanging around the corner, waiting to be reactivated. When you look at the dynamics, actually, which, you know, characterize the Cold War, you know, proxy war, you know, where you sponsor militia to attack another country, where you give funding to other countries, all of these things, they've been here until today. You know, they're still here today. So all of those things are here with us. I think what changes is the influence of international organizations, the reactivation of diplomacy, of trying to solve problems through diplomatic means instead of using proxy war. So the Cold War, to a large degree, I think, it's has always been around.
That's it. So
at least the vagaries of the Cold War.
The vagaries of the Cold War, that's it. So right now there is still NATO, of course, even though now the EU as well, part of NATO, many of them, but still a force, isn't it?
Exactly.
In itself. And then one can say that perhaps there's a rogues version of the Warsaw Pact.
Mhm.
I don't know,
Mhm.
China,
Yeah.
Russia,
Yeah.
North Korea, even Iran.
Yeah.
When I look at this landscape, it seems to me that you've got the so-called liberal democracies and the autocracies.
Mhm. I mean,
And then we've got relationship with both. You say, look at the China, the
Yeah.
penetration of China
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So where are we going? Does it matter? You've got these two
Yeah.
camps, to
Yeah.
my mind, really, the
Yeah.
autocracies and the liberal democracies.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How
I think
should we play our hand?
we should not fall into any camps, any of the,
There's
neither
like
of these
non-alignment.
camps. No, I think what we should do as a continent, or let's say as a country here, is to actually look at what we want, what we have, and what we can do with what we have. To say we're going to fall into the Western liberal narratives or camp, or into the Soviet, Russia, the global South, those group of gatherings.
I get you. I get you. But,
so
that is very interesting.
This brings me back to what Deng Xiaoping said also in the 70s, when actually a journalist asked him. A lot of people attribute this quote to Mao Zedong, but it is of course Deng Xiaoping's saying. Somebody was like, "Do you think China is going to, liberalize and embrace capitalism? Do you think capitalism is better or communism, right?" And then Deng Xiaoping's answer was very impressive. He was like, "It doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white. What matters is that it can catch mice." So I think to say we should embrace this or that, it's not what really matters for me. What matters mostly is how do we as a people create our own system of governance and structures and political framework that would ensure that we uplift our people.
That's it. But that would have to be rooted in a structure of values.
Yes.
I know that within the polity, never mind international politics, within the polity, we like our liberties.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are really more with these liberal democracies.
Yeah. No,
this is what we're trying to encourage with our governments, far
yes,
more.
But to say that we like our liberty implies also that other countries, Russia, and they don't like their liberty. They do like their liberty.
Well, the imposition, the top-down from
like
the government, people cannot do anything about it.
No, they do like their liberties. They have elections, even though you can question the elections or whatever. What I want to tell you is this, is that, look, the West, in terms of development, has reached a certain tipping point, right? A lot of countries from this end that are not democratic actually are moving up slowly. But a lot of these countries today, when you compare to the level of development today, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say Armenia, okay, or Brazil. When you compare Brazil's level of development today to, let's say, the United States level of development today, you actually realize that Brazil is more democratic than the United States. I can explain more.
Yes, you have.
A lot of black women got the right to vote in the U.S. in the 60s,
Yes.
after the civil rights movement, right? And during those days, in the 60s, the United States had reached certain level of development that Brazil is not today. And today in Brazil, they have, I think, a universal suffrage where a lot of people can vote. Now, moving on further to another country, I can give an example about it. It's Sweden, for example. Sweden, a lot of people in the 80s, they left Sweden for many reasons. One of them is lack of freedom. Also, you were forced to, be a Protestant. The free church was not allowed. So a lot of people who choose not to belong to the hegemonic church were actually forced to leave Sweden and immigrated to the United States. And the level of development in Sweden during those days, it's actually not comparable to any level of development that we have in any country here today.
Yes.
So you can see that we're more democratic to be a poor country than we should be.
Absolutely, and this link, as it were, between democracy and development is a very, very weak one. The
Yes.
industrialized world, they became very rich when they talk about 1920s Edwardian England. It wasn't really democratic.
Yeah, that's what
so
I mean.
it's a very thin, the link is extremely weak.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that the argument for democracy is not about economic development. It's got nothing to do with that. It's about values. What do I value in the human being? I think democracy empowers the ordinary person.
But you know you cannot espouse or actually follow certain values if you don't have, if your economic situation is not at certain point. What I want to say is that the West became democratic after they've developed, reached certain level of development.
This is my point.
Exactly.
It was introduced piecemeal. From 1215, the Magna Carta.
It came in
gradually. That's said in installments.
Exactly.
And then Africa, we just woke up one day, they said universal suffrage. Political thinkers knew that there was something slightly wrong with that, but nobody would say it. Nobody said.
That is problematic, and that actually it's one of the many reasons that actually created what a lot of people call patrimonialism.
Absolutely.
Political patrimonialism, where you actually use state resources to reward your loyalists, for people to vote for you, you buy vote in an indirect way.
That sort of thing. Let's just hold it there. On patrimonialism, we'll come back to that. We'll just take a short break here.
As the fastest growing GSM company in the Gambia, QCell has the widest 4G plus coverage in the country, 3 times faster internet speed than our competitors. So switch now and dial *335# and enjoy what true 4G feels like. QCell, the Gambia's trusted network.
Welcome back to the Viewpoint. My guest today is Mr. Ahmad Jeng. I can call him, he's an expert really on international relations and the like. Today we're talking geopolitics. What world are we living in and how must we situate ourselves within these complex relationships, as it were. Just before the break, you were talking about conditions that really encourage patrimonialism, that sort of thing, which is not really good for our governance, as it were, isn't it? We've seen in all sorts of ways it distorts good governance. Continue with the...
I was talking about, you said, we were imposed certain political framework, let's say, election, everyone goes out and vote, whereas in the West, the democratization process actually came about gradually. Ours is more like, this is it, and this is what I have been emphasizing a lot of the times, that, look, we were imposed a lot of the institutional structures and frameworks that we have. We didn't build the foundation of these structures. They were just imposed on us. And then we reached a certain point. We actually, a lot of African countries, I think, they went on to ensure the continuity of sort of colonialism within the state itself. With colonial powers, they use, the kings, patrimonial kings, and gave them money, and then they went on to the family level and to the village level, and then they also buy the loyalties of the people, right? And then gradually, when we got independence, then we have a modern state, but the patrimonial attitude continues. That's why becomes today what a lot of people call neo-patrimonialism. Neo is, the combination of the rational state, with the institutions, formal institutions, and all of that. Patrimonialism is the traditional way of doing politics or of doing this thing.
You realize that most things we call corruption, that's really patrimonialism in action.
Exactly.
Extraordinary. That's why it's so difficult. It's so rooted in here.
So what we have are modern institutions that actually have some semblance of a traditional way of doing politics.
That's it. But then you wonder, what political system do we have? I know that we're talking about geopolitics, but the two are linked, aren't they? These national states, they are the international actors, as it were. So it depends on also what ideas do you speak to when you govern your own country, as it were, which is very important. So this is it. We've been experimenting with this democracy. Well, a lot of people will say it was more of a pseudo-democracy in many ways. And economic development, one should never really expect that. I think the literature is out there to tell you that it doesn't necessarily work together, because we've seen autocracies doing far better economically. But this is it. Tough choices here then.
I think
tough choices.
Yeah, I think a lot of scholars, would today say, I think a lot of scholars are actually mad because their theses are proven wrong, and the thesis, these theses, a lot of them, one of them actually has been the idea that you cannot develop without democracy. And this has been proven very wrong by China.
Absolutely.
So this is why a lot of people today are looking forward to the downfall of China, because they still think that it's something that's literally impossible for a lot of people, that you cannot develop a country without democracy. And China proved them wrong, because from the 1980s to 2015, China lifted literally 800 million people out of poverty, and that's equivalent to almost the population of entire Europe.
Absolutely. The version I've got was from Amartya Sen. He said, you don't need democracy really for economic development, but you need democracy for security. In the longer term.
Of course.
As you get your middle class, you're becoming richer. There will be pressure on the party to share power. That's
for
historical.
That's
really what the argument is.
For me, actually, what you need is the rule of law.
Exactly.
It's the rule of law. It's just what you need. Not only on paper, but also to make sure that people buy into the idea of the laws, and that you build legitimacy. When you build legitimacy, people tend to actually follow the law and the procedures. People actually would accept the results of whatever comes about.
That's it. And it's important to understand this. Even in so-called autocracies, they will deny you your civil liberties and all of that. But in key areas, they've got the rule of law. Otherwise, their systems will not produce the outcomes they want.
Exactly. Because I think also it's difficult to completely liberalize certain societies, because we have our values, we have also our way of life. We need a certain sort of control. I'm not advocating for dictatorship here. What I am saying is that a country has to be governed, otherwise it becomes a failed state. One of the signs of a failed state is when the government actually does not have the monopoly on violence. Government needs to do that. Government is the only institution, I would say, or entity or an actor that should be allowed to use violence. By that I mean government has monopoly. I'm not saying government should use violence. What I'm saying is the only one. So if you have some armed militia or some rebels around an area and they're not giving peace an opportunity, then it's something that government has to solve. Otherwise, we can say it's a failed state.
No, absolutely. So in the end, really, it depends on what we do. So now, let's come closer home. Gambia. Well, this is what we've been calling it. We're in a transition.
Yeah.
How do you see the transition?
How do we conceptualize it? Or how do I see it?
What I mean is, we set ourselves some tasks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Institutional reform.
Yeah.
We'll do this. We'll do that.
Yeah.
What we've set ourselves.
Yeah.
How do you see the journey so far?
I think we should be very proud in the transitional process that we are into right now. It's out there. The evidence is out there. Usually,
name a few.
When I'm going to do that, definitely. Usually, when a country has been under a dictatorship for many years and is transitioning to democracy, and if this country is poor, it is very likely that within the first 5 years it will slide back. It will slide back. And example is Sudan, which actually after the fall of Bashir, people were hopeful that it was going to go on, and it just slided back. Egypt, after the fall of Hosni Mubarak, and when Morsi came to power, a lot of people thought it was, gonna get better, in terms of democracy.
So it gets worse before it gets better.
It went back to Al-Sisi, right? And then we have seen what happens in Tunisia and in Algeria, all these countries. Gambia, I was expecting us actually to slide back at a certain point, right? But after the election in 2021, after the election, I felt very proud of what we've been able to accomplish, and this is thanks largely to non-state actors, civil society organizations, you and a few other people also, who are actually, shaping the discourse in the country. I think that is important.
Yes, so often the complaints here, especially on social media, nothing seems to be moving. There's so much corruption, we've got now this phrase, rampant corruption. And, to me, there's no institutional reform, nothing is moving. But to you, it's like, should we expect anything differently? Given the circumstances, the way we are moving right now, this is what you're talking about, the backsliding. After that long dictatorship, I think a backsliding.
Yeah, I think we're moving very slowly. Also, we have to know that we still have, in terms of institution, the way the institution functions, and also the attitude of the average Gambian who has been working under Yahya Jammeh. You can see the legacy of the former government still taking a strong hold in our institutions. I visited some of these institutions when I arrived 2 weeks ago. I interacted with a lot of people, but you can see that the Jammeh's legacy is still hanging around some of these institutions. But I think, I will repeat this, I have been saying this all the time, with the right people in the right place, with the right advice, I think we can be better.
I reckon.
Yeah.
All right. The way things are running here now, we are part of ECOWAS. One of my biggest fears, I have to say, when I look around, I don't see much experience, not experience in sort of good conditions, in healthy, wholesome conditions. A lot of them came through the ranks of Yahya Jammeh. Then there was nothing. So when they go out to negotiate on my behalf, you all know that when you go to these multilateral negotiations, you really have to fight your corner. It's very easy for the bigger powers to really take advantage, and then you agree to stop that. perhaps generations to come will pay for it. It's disadvantageous. That's my biggest fear. This relationship between small Gambia, you know, not much bargaining chip, not much bargaining power in these multilateral negotiations. When they come back, they try to tell us it's a win-win situation. I doubt it from what we know of international politics, and you said it earlier on, survival of the fittest.
I think international negotiations are difficult, and every negotiation is also unique in its own. And the country you're negotiating and the actors involved. Usually, as a country, if you don't have the expertise of certain areas, I'm sure you have your citizens abroad. I think that's where the diaspora comes in. You know, consult the diaspora on certain issues. When you go to negotiate with Sweden today, and you're negotiating with Sweden, with somebody here, and you're taking them to negotiate with Sweden, I think it's going to be problematic because you don't understand the culture, you don't understand the nuances within the society, within the political system, within a lot of things, right? So you might probably need to hire the expertise of a Gambian who lives in Sweden. The same applies to many other countries around the Scandinavia, but even Western Europe. You need the expertise of people who live there, who could help you to pin down things and explain to you what they think and give you thought and ideas. I think one thing we undermine a lot is ideas in this country. Ideas, we undermine that. Europe is built on ideas before the money comes around.
That's very, very, very true. Perhaps it's educational level, perhaps it's history, that is something else. But one theme I want to explore with you here is about the nature of our organizations, be it ECOWAS or the AU and the like. Even though we will claim to have certain values, perhaps even have conditions that need to be fulfilled before you become a member. But it appears as if it is more political, driven more by a wish, if you don't mind me saying so, this Pan-Africanist idea, which is simply a word. So in the end, it just became a club, a talking shop, really, perhaps. From OAU to AU, there are things beginning to change. You know, when I look at the EU, not every European country is a member of the EU. You've got to fulfill certain criteria, certain standards.
Of course.
That's it. So that individual nations, we can become aspirational. But the way it is right now, it is ineffectual.
I think.
How would you respond to that?
I think one of the main reasons why a lot of countries are not in the EU, it has to do with the huge economic disparities.
That's exactly my point.
Between the countries within the EU.
Absolutely.
Because if you see Britain actually pull out of the EU, it's because a lot of Eastern Europeans workers who, the enlargement of 2014, when a lot of other countries joined the EU. So these EU citizens, let's say Romania and few others, they had the European citizenship passport, of course, which allowed them actually then to enter Britain.
But this is exactly my point. That was when things started to go wrong.
Exactly.
When they stuck to the strict economic conditions, things were going right. But it became more politicized. So they went for more for that political incentive to widen. Now this is the one that brings the problem. So coming back here, there was nothing about having stringent economic conditions to make countries strive and work. It was merely a political club. I didn't know the ex-colonials.
I think what we need to understand is this: the European Union was founded not because Europe wanted to liberalize itself from a colonial power. The European Union started in the 50s because of economic collaboration, economic integration, and then it moved on to security, to environment, to gender, to child labor and to all of those things, right?
That's it. But in other words, I think the model. I think here I'm looking at the frame. The frame being that before the union, there were preparations.
Yes, yes.
With us, we were driven into it. We've just got our independence. You know, there is this Pan-Africanist ideas in the air.
Exactly.
So look at how we govern ourselves in the end.
Yeah, yeah.
There were all these ideas being touted about, but in the end, look at what happened.
I think one of the biggest challenges, actually, also we need to know that the African Union was founded mostly by diasporans. So people don't get it. Mostly, you know,
the fight was done there.
Other, you know, Du Bois and others who actually met in London. All of these people were living abroad, and the idea was liberalization. Anti-imperialism, you know, independence, right? Not so much was talked about in terms of economics. Only recently then they started to think about economic integration and so on and so forth. And so you can see that a lot of countries that joined the African Union joined it because they feel like the African Union is the clubhouse of where you feel you are an African country, you have to join for many reasons, security reasons, not for economic reasons, if you know what I mean. Because our economies in Africa they are not integrated. And that is the biggest challenge, I think, that the continent faces. And
perhaps that should have been one of the first tasks. Yeah. I once listened to Lee Kuan Yew, quite interestingly. We love quoting him, his Harvard lecture. Yeah. There was something that he did. I'm saying that, and he said he knew Nyerere, he knew Kaunda, and all of that. Yeah. He said, we were brilliant at deconstructing. Yeah. This was just a political project. Exactly. Deconstructing what was there, but now to construct, we had not given it much thought. The models didn't work.
But I think,
but that is our challenge now.
I think also there were very divergent views when we became independent. Nyerere wanted rapid and quick integration of the whole of Africa. I mean, Kwame Nkrumah, sorry, excuse me. Yes. Kwame Nkrumah wanted a quick, an organization of Africa, just like the United States, right? Whereas Nyerere wanted a gradual integration. And the two ideas are conflicting as well, but also more importantly, Africa is diverse to an extent that we sometimes you speak here, speak Wolof, and somebody in the East speak Swahili, and so it's become difficult to actually integrate the continent like that. But a lot can be done in terms of economic integration. But look at us here in Senegal. Today, you have your bag of rice, you crosses the border to the southern part of Senegal or the other part of Senegal, the Senegalese customs services would arrest you and take your bag of rice. They would say you should buy it in Senegal, you know. So where is the integration we're talking about here when we talk about this? I think what we need to do is to sit on the table and at least begin this integration gradually. Gradually would mean between us and Senegal. Today, if you live at the border in Senegal, you should be at the border in Gambia or Senegal or either side of the ice wall. You should be able to move freely, but also with your goods freely. But then it comes back to the issue of trans-border criminality, right? Trans-border crime. That's why we need a lot of security. I'm not talking about security only as in the forms of military or army or whatever, but also human security. Whereas today, it's difficult for you to take a bus from here to Mali. You know, you suffer a lot along the way. Mali, everywhere you have to pay money before you reach Bamako, right? The integration in the European Union, which was not actually the idea in the beginning, today allowed you to take a train from Sweden, Stockholm, direct to Berlin without any problems.
Absolutely, that's the thing. Nothing really comes fully shaped it starts anyhow, and gradually it acquires all sorts of features.
Exactly.
So now we're coming towards the end, really. Looking ahead.
Yeah.
What do you see? Are you a pessimist and an optimist? Especially when you look at our country. Well, with our country, it seems to me you think that you are an optimist because all of what's going on right now, you're a political scientist, you've seen it before. You backslide first before you research. I think that is really your theory now. How do you see it going forward?
I think I am more of a realist here. By that I mean I look at the realities we have and our capabilities as a country. We have institutions that have been demoralized for quite a long time and are of course picking up today. Today I met a minister whom I don't want to mention here, very brilliant. You know, we had a really interesting conversation, and I see a lot of ideas in him, but also these are ideas that he said in a couple of years, maybe 1 or 2, we will see a lot of great changes. And I'm like, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. The reality we have in this country, sometimes I feel like we have these misplaced priorities. And if you have misplaced priorities, you need to get your act together. Otherwise, it's just going to explode. We have youth unemployment, which is, of course, I think a ticking bomb, if you ask me. You have rising crime. You know, you have disintegration of the family unit, whereas, you know, a lot of people will tell you, you know, it's my child, but I cannot do anything about it. You know, when we went to school, here was quite different from what we have today. I think we have a generation that has become consumerism. You know, they consume so much social media, and the parents do not have an extra eye into what the kids are doing, and so on and so forth.
So the cohesion,
yeah,
that
you need
diffused.
You need a system. What I mean by that, you need a system. In many countries, when a child doesn't go to school, doesn't appear, the teacher would call the parents to find out. How many teachers would do that? I don't blame the teachers. They don't have the resources to do that. The system is not built that way. If a child doesn't go to school and is sick, usually the parents should call the school and say, my child is not coming today. But they will not do that because the system does not tell them that this is what you should do. The system is not built to ensure that you have to have constant correspondence with the teacher and also with the school to make sure that the child either is in school or at home.
Because in the end, really, it's in the interest of the child that
exactly.
everybody else shows interest in them.
Exactly.
And
it takes a village to raise a child.
It takes a village.
Exactly.
We've come to the end. I don't know, we've had some heartening stuff, nice prospects, but here I'm inclined to think of what one British Prime Minister used to say.
Don't tell me it's Winston Churchill.
No, not Churchill. Was it Disraeli or Gladstone? All man for himself and God for us all. It seems like that's the kind of world we live in. Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmad Jai.
Thank you very much for having me.
Until next time, I'm Goodbye.
Thank you.